All right, guys. So last class, we covered the converse of the Pythagorean theorem. And I'm just going to review it again real quick for you guys. Okay, so remember our a squared plus b squared, b squared equals c squared. That's our regular Pythagorean theorem. That proves it's a right triangle. And just a reminder, that's a triangle with a 90-degree angle. So it looks something like this. So we could either have that right corner where it looks like a square in the corner, or it could specify 90 degrees. Okay, now if a squared plus b squared is less than c squared, so c squared, the longest side is the biggest, that's going to be obtuse triangle. So whatever this largest size, that's going to be your C. So it'd be like A, B, C. C is always your largest side. And then that's definitely above 90 degrees. Okay. And if A squared plus B squared is greater than C squared, A squared plus B squared is greater than C squared, then that's going to be an acute angle. So it'd be like A, B. This is probably the biggest angle right here, so this would be your C. Just remember your C for a right angle. If you drew a line out, your C would be right there. Okay, so let's apply this to a problem. So let's say you see a triangle. We know it's possible because 6 plus 8 is bigger than 10, and the longest side plus the other sides will be longer. Okay, so we want to have our two smaller sides, so 6 squared plus 8 squared, and it's going to be something. We don't know if it's going to be greater than, equals, so I'm just put like a little box, to 10 squared. So 6 squared, off the top of my head, is 36, and 8 squared is going to be 64, and 10 squared is 100. And 36 plus 64 is going to give us 100. And 100 is not greater than 100 because it's going to be equal. So it's going to be equal. So we already know from before, if it's equal, that's going to be a right triangle. Okay, let's look at number 2. So let's say we had one that was like this, 10, 4, and 8. Your C is always your biggest number. So we're going to have 4 squared plus 8 squared is something to C squared. Oh, sorry, 10 squared. Okay, so 4 squared is 16. 8 squared is 64. 100. And 16 plus 64. That's going to give me, I believe, 80. Let me double check. Yep, that gives me 80. So 100 is bigger. So when our C squared is bigger, that means it's going to be an obtuse triangle. Okay. Okay, and let's say I gave you just a random batch of numbers. Let's say I gave you square root of 221, 14, 10. So remember, we want to make sure that the two sides add up to be larger than a third side. So we'll double check, especially if you see something like this, when it's like square root of 221. That could be really any number. So, oh wait, why is it not? Okay, we'll make it big. Oh, no, that doesn't do much. Okay, that'll do, I guess. Okay, so square root of 221, square root, gives me 4 point, I think I did that twice. Doesn't seem right. Hold on. $221. Oh, sorry. 221. There. Oh, that's why it was blocking it. Okay, so it's 14 point. Let's just say 8. Let's just do 14.9. Let's just keep it simple. 14.9. Okay. So it's about 14.9, 14, and 10. So 14.9 plus 14 is greater than 10, so that checks out. 10 plus 14 is like 24, so it's going to be greater than 14.9, so that checks out. 14.9 plus 10 is greater than 14, that checks out. So it can be a triangle. We're not going to use this decimal form, but we do know that this is going to be the biggest term because 14.9 is bigger than 14. So that's going to be your C. Okay. So A squared, B squared. Doesn't matter the order. We could just say 14 squared plus 10 squared equals the square root of 221 squared. And now remember, when you have a square root squared, that cancels out and it just equals that number. So the square root of 221, essentially this cancels out with this. Okay, so let me rewrite that so we don't lose track of it. 14 squared plus 10 squared equals the square root of 221 squared, and I'm going to cancel that right here. So cancel here to here. So now I could rewrite this as 221. Okay. 14 squared, 14 squared gives me 196. And 10 squared is 100. Okay, so, oh, I'm sorry. We don't know if this is equal, so I'm just going to put a box in between. Okay, and 196 plus 100 is going to be 296. And 296 is greater. So this A squared plus B squared is greater than our C squared. So we go back to our original. When A squared plus B squared is greater than the C squared, it means it's an acute triangle. So I can let you know this is an acute triangle. And that would be your answer, is acute. Okay. Looking at our final example, same thing. I'm just going to give you a bunch of numbers. So let's say I have 2 square root of 2, square root of 21, and square root of 13. Honestly, the easiest thing to do is just put in your calculator. So I'll start off with 2. We'll do the square root of 2 first and then multiply it by 2 after. So square root of 2 times 2 gives me about 2.8. And the reason why we're doing this is we're trying to figure out what's our C. The largest number is always going to be our C. So square root of 21, it's going to be about 4.6. And the square root of 13, it's going to be about 3.6. So 4.6 definitely our biggest. That's going to be our C squared. The other ones, it doesn't really matter the order. Those are going to be our A and our B. So we have 2 square root of 2 squared plus square root of 13 squared. I'm sorry. It could be equal. It could be greater than, less than. We don't know. The square root of 21 squared. Okay. So this one, I'm going to show you kind of the different what it kind of looks like in the different ways. So we'll set this first one aside. We'll just leave it as is. And remember, when we have a square root and we square it, those are going to cancel out. So I just get 13. So it's going to be 2 square root of 2, all that's squared, plus 13 is something, 221. So if you're not sure if you're supposed to square just the outside 2 or both, or like what you should do, it doesn't hurt to double check in the calculator. But just make sure you kind of keep track of what you're doing. Okay. So I'm going to do the square root of 2. And then, so that right here, this part right here, do the square root of 2. And I'm going to multiply it by 2. Okay. And then now I'm going to square it. That gives us 8. Now, you could have already known that the squared kind of distributes. So 2 squared, it'd be 2 squared times square root of 2 squared. This is another way to write this. So I'm going to kind of like draw a little arrow. Whee! Essentially, that would cancel out. And 2 squared is 4. Gives you 8. If you got stuck, no worries. Not the end of the world. Use your handy dandy calculator. Just make sure you kind of keep track of the numbers in there because you don't want the calculator to give you a wrong answer. Okay. So 18 plus 13, and believe that's 21. Let's double check. 13 plus 8, or it doesn't matter. 21. So those are equal to each other. So when they're equal, we can see up here, that means it's going to be a right triangle. So, oh, you know what? It is correct. It is a right triangle, but I forgot to check that these added up. So we'll do that real quick. So I know 4.6 plus 3.6, 4.6 plus 2.8, and 2.8 plus 3.6. The biggest one is making sure that this last one is, because no matter what, this is always the bigger number. So you know that's automatically going to happen. Okay, so 2.8 plus 3.6 gives us 6.4, which is bigger than 4.6, so it can be a triangle. And just remember those, it's like those 2 little orange nubs that we had to try to create a triangle. It should still be on the right side of the board in the classroom. But remember how they're too short to create the line, because the 2 legs have to be larger than a third leg. And that works for all of these cases right here. And since it works, we know it's a right triangle.